shine a spotlight on some Metroid. So last week, the randomizer selected the original Metroid and the remakey Metroid. So the original Metroid came out in August of 1987 in North America, August of 1986 in Japan. Um, I have a lot of nostalgia for this game. Even though I didn't like deep dive into the Metroid series until a few years ago, the original NES game and Super Metroid were like big staples of my early gaming days. I used to rent Super Metroid all the time. This was a cartridge that was always in my neighborhood being traded around. I just like I've said on this podcast before, it's one of the only games that I'll like throw on a play and just watch someone on YouTube play it. I don't know if Sean remembers, but Samus was my main in the original Smash Brothers on Nintendo 64 back
Oh,
in the day.
yeah. Yep, yep.
So I was a Samus main. This is one of the few games like all right, I already said that. I'll throw it on YouTube just to watch people play it. Then there's also like the beep bop beep music of the power up rooms. It's like a comfort sound. It reminds me of the old Screw Attack website from the early 2000s
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
because that's what they would play before all their videos. And I think it's interesting that this franchise has one of the most coherent, straightforward storylines for a Nintendo franchise. Like Mario, there is no overarching story really. Zelda, they got that timeline that's all over the place. Kirby, again, not really a linkable story. But this, especially if you only pay attention to the 2D games, has a
Yeah.
very straightforward 1 through 5 story going on. That said, I would not recommend the NES version to new players. It's we'll get into that when we talk about Zero Mission, but I don't know. I think Super Metroid's what made this series um what it is more than any other Nintendo franchise that received a Super Nintendo upgrade. Like A Link to the Past, without it, I still think Zelda would have continued on, but Super Metroid was like it was almost like a do-over for the start of the series and I think without it, this game would have been lumped in with games like Balloon Fight and Kid Icarus, who was made by the same people. Um, Ice Climber. We would have been talking about it like those games if it weren't for Super Metroid. So this is great for the NES. I'll hear your guys' thoughts, and then we'll talk. I'll hold on to what I want to say when we talk about Zero Mission.
Man, you really threw me off with Link to the Past right there. You made me start thinking about that. Because I don't, because that's a huge hypothetical to like think like if there was not Link to the Past, like what that franchise was, and if there was not Super Metroid, what would come after that?
I think the Zelda franchise still would have had a they didn't have an installment on the Super Nintendo. And yeah, this is a rabbit hole to go down. But I
It,
still think they would have had a game because that Game Boy game started development as an attempt to make the original Zelda on Game Boy. So they probably still would have made Link's Awakening, and I think then they would have had a decent enough following to do a Nintendo 64 game, and the timeline would have been very similar.
I mean, I love that you brought it up, and I think there's a lot of comparisons between these two games. And I know we talked about every year, like we went through like every year in a segment long ago. Uh Crazy that this game, Metroid NES, came out 1 week after. Yeah, after right. Yeah, Metroid came out 7 days after NES Zelda in North America, and just 1 month after
Ooh,
Kid Icarus. So, like, I
that's
was
weird.
I wasn't alive. I know you guys were, like, super young, but imagine, like, in 1987. 1987 to me is just I think it's the first year Nintendo really went, "This is what gaming is going to be." Like, this is what the future of gaming is, and just dictated what modern home console gaming was, because they created a whole new genre with Metroid, even if, it what didn't create a new genre at first. But I mean, that's crazy. Like in same in a month, they had 3 IPs that are huge. In a week, they had an IP that is the second or third biggest in the company's history, and Metroid,
Mhm.
which is like a top 10 in the company's history.
Right.
So lots of comparisons between just like those two games. Does does a built-in map for the NES game better if it had it?
I think so. I think a big part of the charm of this game is when you have to make your own map. It's you to learn the layout a little better. There's even in the instruction manual for this, left a page for you to draw a map, which is something that they did a few times. I saw in some games growing up, but it was always
Yep.
kind of funny when you'd see it. Or they'd give you like a checklist, or they give you like a page for notes. Like you can't find paper on your own.
I mean, the original NES Metroid, really all I have on it is the gaming history, but it just has not held up for me. So I really can't get myself to play much of it.
Also has a password system, which I think we
Mhm.
see first with
Not in
Kid.
Japan though. In Japan, you could save your progress because it was on the Famicom disk system, so you could actually save onto the disk. We get that.
So, like with Kid Icarus, this also had a system. I think that's all I had for NES. Yeah, and then Zero Mission, I was playing through it and researching it. I was trying to think what I would change with Mission because it feels like a game that is not like a perfect remake, but is it a remake that is missing anything obvious that I'm missing?
You know what's really funny? You talking about what they could have done different. You can find recently surfaced online a beta build where they had a character design for Samus in Zero Mission that looked more like the NES version, where it's got the weird like shrimp shaped head. And they very wisely decided at some point to change that to the Super Metroid style Samus, because but you can see clips of it online. It's really weird looking, and I'm they changed it. Came Before we get too far in, Zero Mission came out February 2004 in North America, May 2004 in Japan.
I mean, as far as remakes go, this is like the definitive way to play the original game, honestly.
Yeah.
All the quality of life changes make it such a more enjoyable experience. So,
Yeah, the original is now like a reference point, but even as far as Metroid canon goes, because there's slight changes to the story in Zero Mission, Zero
mm,
Mission is the version of events now too. So if you're just trying to follow the Metroid story, there's not even a reason to play the original.
right.
And
Which, if you're curious, I wrote it down here. The Prime series takes place in between Metroid and Metroid 2, or I guess it's between Zero Mission and 2. So the timeline would be Zero Mission, Prime, Prime 2, Prime 3, I'm assuming Prime 4, Federation Force, Metroid 2, Super Metroid Fusion, and then Dread. That's your timeline.
Okay.
and
Other M is in there somewhere. I didn't even look because most people
is it?
don't even consider it canon anymore because they hated it so much.
Oh, I thought that it wasn't. I thought that was just separate altogether. But I guess
I
It might be
it
because
might
it's what
Samus
people
has a
say.
completely different personality in that game, and I
yeah.
haven't played it. I want to play it just to see, but yeah, the reviews kept me away.
Interesting.
N There's also a new area in Zero Mission. They added, for the first time ever, in the series, we have Zero Suit Samus who, crawls around a new area. Um, and, also the Game Boy Advance version, I wanna bring this up. It had a link feature that unlocked an art gallery when you paired it with Metroid Fusion. And we said this on the podcast like a year, maybe even longer ago. Data miners found that Nintendo Switch Online has the capability of making this link happen. They just haven't given it to us yet for some reason.
Yeah, that would be cool to see, actually.
Fun.
Um,
Love to always hear that. That seems to always come up in this podcast when we do these games. Yeah,
yeah.
Stop keeping things from us,
yeah,
Nintendo.
features we don't have. Stupid question because I'm not looking it up. 2004 Zero Mission comes out. Is the DS out in 2004? Is that later?
That's later.
That's later, right? Good to
It
say.
might be 05. I'm gonna do that real quick. That should be
I
something
don't
I
think
know.
it was that far after 04, but I don't
Oh
think it
no,
was 04.
November 2004, so the end of the year.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
because
That might
2004
be
sounded
Japan
like
though. That might be Japan, and maybe we got it a little later.
it sounded like a kind of a late title for Game Boy Advance, which is normal,
Oh, we got
especially
it
for
before Japan. What? We got the
Really?
DS in November, and then November 21st, and it looks like Japan got it about a week later in December 2nd. That's weird.
Oh, wow.
take that,
Look, I was just
take that.
curious before we get into our rankings, since we've all played it now. Dread has made it really hard for me to go back to these older games.
Oh, you're talking
Has
about
that
original
affect-
Metroid?
No, even Zero Mission.
Oh, no.
It's good, but Dread is like the pinnacle for me for these games, and it's just so hard to go back and play the older ones for me.
I'm more of a fan of these side-scrolly ones. Oh, never mind. I thought I was confusing Dread with Prime for a second there. Yes, and they did do a remake of the second game, Samus Returns on the DS, which is most closely related to Dread. Like it very, very much resembles Metroid Dread.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, I was confusing that with Prime. But even so, I played Fusion for the first time last year and I loved it.
I'm hoping Fusion I'll actually dive through because when Super Metroid comes up, I could talk about it. But I've beaten it. I don't ever need to go back to play it again.
I wish they would do a remake like this. I know I'm not the first person to say this, but for the original Zelda, bringing it back to Zelda, do one where the hints are correctly translated and
Oh yeah.
you know, update the controls a little,
Mhm.
the
Yep.
just like a little touch up, but the thing is we don't have a handheld system anymore, and that's what these type of projects were perfect for.
We do.
Now we have the hybrid handheld, so everything has to be a little bit like the link between Link's Awakening Echoes of Wisdom style is the perfect example of that. Like they couldn't do any less than that, you know?
Make it handheld only on Switch. Just
It doesn't play on the TV.
you put it in the dock. The game says no. The game says
It deletes your file actually. If you try to play it on the Switch, it deletes the game. You have to buy
you tried to cheat. Yeah, you tried to do something that's not allowed. Uh,
You can't have a bigger screen.
yeah.
You buy it again.
For Dread, I just wanted to say that I think the controls in Dread make it the pinnacle 2D Metroid
Yeah.
game now. But a good reason to play these other games is that, in my opinion, Dread is just so freaking hard. I mean, even
That's true.
even at the normal difficulty, I think Dread is just a very, very difficult game. And none of them are
But doable. Like I feel like it's the
doable.
perfect I feel like it's the perfect difficulty level where a lot of those bosses I did struggle with, but once I finally did beat them, it felt so good to say like, "Yes, I got you. I got you. I learned your pattern."
Metroid gave you your Souls experience.
And
I did have to look up a YouTube video for some of them, but I got your pattern.
and none of the games are that long. You know,
No.
No.
I
The
think
whole
I
point is to be able to finish them in under 5 hours,
yeah.
so you get the
Right.
good ending.
So that would be my reason to go back. But yeah, the biggest thing that stands out between old and new are the controls, and Dread, they just nailed it. Yeah, I can't wait to see
Well,
whatever is the next 2D Metroid.
I would say Zero Mission nails the controls too. Like the improvements they add to that, even
Mhm.
just being able to shoot diagonally is huge.
So I ranked the original NES Metroid, since we're talking about terms of quality here. Uh, Even though I have all my nostalgia for it, I do recognize that there's a reason I watch people on YouTube play it and I don't play it myself. It's
Yeah.
because I don't have the whole map memorized and don't want to draw a map and things like that. So anyway, I ranked this right above Samus Returns. I mean, Return of Samus on the Game Boy, and it's right below Kirby's Dream Land, also on Game Boy. So in between two Game Boy games, it's at number 45 for the original. And then I might as well tell you where I ranked Zero while I'm here. I ranked Zero much higher. It is very high on my list. I love this game. I ranked it at number 18, puts it right below Mario Party 2, right above. This is going to be controversial, but yes, I'd rather play at this point Zero Mission than the NES version of Super Mario Brothers.
All right. The original Metroid is at 81. That puts it under Rival Turf and above Excite Bike 64. And then Zero Mission did better, but not to the extent you liked it. Put it at 43, so it's under Killer Instinct and just above Pokemon Puzzle League.
For me, I put NES Metroid at 45 and Zero Mission
Oh.
pretty good above that at 28. Think Zero Mission is awesome. It's an awesome it's an awesome remake. I'm kind of lost at what else to like really say about it. And yeah, I played through it, was thinking not much I would change about it. And I also mentioned that Metroid came up as an A tier game franchise on the most recent episode of Harrison Talks Pod featuring Kevin that was on this week. So if you want to know the rest of our tier list, you
Nice.
can go and listen to that episode. Just a little cross promotion before we
By the way,
end.
listener, it's your fault it didn't rank an S. Uh, that was one of our talking points, is that as great a series as it is, it's never connected much with players and it doesn't sell very well. So you're the thing keeping it from S tier.
Yes,
That's
it's not
fair.
it's not Kevin or Sean or I. It is your fault because we like this
Yeah.
game, so it's your fault.